right, welcome back to our last lecture for Unit 8. This is the next art impulse. This one is the documentary impulse, titled Tell It Like It Is. And so we're going to be covering some of similar ground. We're going to be talking about some things that relate to the last art impulse, the study impulse. We're also going to be talking about some things that related to our art and power impulse lecture. Um, but we're really going to be approaching from a different point of view, which is this idea that for all of art, but especially for the traditions of art in the last 500 years or so, there's been this interest in artists being truth tellers, like looking at something really honestly and giving us the complete and unvarnished truth of it. And so we're going to focus with that. Um, we see hints of this. I think the whole interest in genre painting is to a certain degree somewhat of a reflection of that interest in truthfulness. But we have to take that with a bit of grain of salt. I think that there's a lot of sentiment and a lot of metaphor that's built into genre paintings. In the case of Vermeer, there are these kind of like both personal and sort of allegorical in terms of references to mythology and to history type metaphor built into his paintings. And in the case of Chardin, it's more of a social metaphor. He's using the idea of making a painting of a particular person as a way of talking about society in whole and about the relationship of class, um, the you know so. And I think we've seen that in some other examples. Um, we have seen a lot of art where, like with the Chocolate Girl, where it is artwork made by an elite class, and they're observing people of a class below them, generally of a servant class, right? And and in some ways, I think that that's kind of it's an interesting thing that that level of really looking carefully, that level of super attention, that somehow people are more comfortable with that when it's being directed down from a class point of view. But at some point, we also start to see artists who are taking a much more kind of democratic approach to looking honestly and looking honestly at issues of class and power. And we talked about with Caravaggio how, to a certain degree, this was a reflection of his, of sort of a theological point of view, that he used poor people primarily as models. And one of the things he said to contemporaries was, I read the Gospels, and Jesus was a poor man, and all his followers were poor men, as far as I can tell. Um, but it's also almost certainly part of the reason why he used poor people for models is because that's what he could afford. But by the time we get to someone like Courbet, the decision to make art focused on, you know, poor or lower middle class people, everyday people, non-nobility people, is um, is a political decision. Like he's literally he's making in some ways almost he's making a revolutionary statement by saying that these people deserve attention and deserve to be seen as heroic or as worthy of art as the nobility are. Um, and one of the things I want to say about this lecture is that this desire to look at things um, truthfully, honestly, and be willing to document them can lead artists in lots of different directions. It can lead artists in a very kind of social progressive kind of direction where they're being social realists. They're trying to represent what is going on in my society right now, and that often leads to a kind of a social reformation type point of view. But it can also mean just really being honest about what it is that's going on. How our bodies are constructed, or um, so we're gonna move on. So we can see anatomy as being something like a form of that kind of like really intense focus on truthfulness. And like I said, when artists are looking at people who are everyday worker people, right? It it's not necessary, but it does happen that we start to see artists who view their job as championing people, such as Lewis Hines and his kind of effort to champion and to advocate for young, children who are working in coal mines and factories. So we can see this in many works of Manet, but we can see, and remember we talked about this painting in the very first lecture of the course. Sorry, I don't have the attributions for it on it. Just ran out of time. Um, but we also, in this kind of effort to see things accurately, see things clearly, we can see all the artwork that we've already looked at that we could see as being somewhat anti-war. We could definitely see a pairing of ideas, especially with the Kappa piece. It's very much about documenting and seeing clearly, seeing honestly. You could say that whereas Jericho is more creating the illusion of seeing honestly, but it isn't really an honest look. I mean, because it was a recreation. He literally had a raft built in his studio, and then he hired the models, but he hired them, in session, like in separate sessions. There'd be certain figures who would be hired to do multiple poses on this raft. So this person is probably the same model as that person, and possibly the same model as that person. So, you know, being willing to see honestly means being a witness, sometimes a witness to things like atrocities. And we have a pairing. Here's a work by Goya, and here's a work by Manet, and very kind of similar scenes, right? Seeing an execution and making a work of art to document that, to say I was there, I saw it. And I think that even like some of the artwork that we've seen earlier, like um, the Richter and the Kiefer here, having to do with art and power, right? That this is also once again this idea of about it's partially about confronting truth, right? Even when the truth is known, you know, not having the truth out there, like right in front of you, is sometimes a way of hiding from the truth. And I think definitely Kiefer's work is like it's not simply just a matter of you need to know this happened. He feels like it's important for people to see it. So, how much time do I have? I think I have enough time. I can finish. Oh, wow. Okay, quick lecture. I got a minute. So we're going to move on. So the main other thing I want to say is that this same kind of interest in like really seeing things the way they are can lead to artwork that's completely in a different direction, that is very just focused on optical observation. So we have a Fantin Latour over here and another Manet. Um, or like these two works, such as um, it can lead to an interest in really just seeing how painting is just abstraction, right? That itself is a form of truthfulness. And or someone like Richter here pointing out that photography itself is an untruthful illusion. So he's trying to be truthful about the untruthfulness. Here we have two artists who are, oh, that's my 1 minute warning. I can do it though. Two artists who are looking at landscape and trying to be really, really honest and truthful about seeing the landscape. I love this Pissarro painting. It is fantastic. Right. We're going to talk a lot more about Monet when we get to the second lecture on color, which will be in the next unit, Unit 9. And so I guess the main thing I want to say right here, because I don't have a lot of time, is that it's a lot about seeing color really truthfully, seeing ambient color rather than local. And both Giacometti and Frank Auerbach, for me, as much as their artwork may look to be kind of strange to you, for me, they're very much about seeing truthfully, seeing honestly. All right.